The Hoop Heads Podcast is brought to you by Head Start Basketball.
Hi, this is Coach Dan DeCrane from Gilmore Academy, and you're listening to the Hoop Heads Podcast.
Hey Hoop Heads! Wanted to take a minute to shout out our partners and friends at Dr. Dish Basketball. Their Dr. Dish shooting machines are undoubtedly the most advanced and user-friendly machines on the market, and they truly accelerate skill development faster than ever. Learn more at drdishbasketball.com and follow their incredible content at Dr. Dish B-Ball on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Mention the Hoop Heads Podcast and save an extra $300 on the Dr. Dish Rebel, All-Star, and CT models. Also, make sure to check out the new Dr. Dish Home Machine, which is perfect for these crazy times when gyms and schools are closed. Visit drdishbasketball.com for details. That's a great deal, Hoop Heads. Get your Dr. Dish shooting machine today.
We wanted to really be agents of change when it came to how coaches interacted with their players and what was this all about and why are these kids playing.
Logan Kosmalski is the co-founder of Pro Skills Basketball, headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina. His father, Len, is a former professional basketball player who was drafted by the Kansas City Kings in 1972. Logan graduated from Trinity High School in Euless, Texas. As a 3-year starter, he was a 3-time All-District selection while also being chosen District Player of the Year and All-State in his senior season. Logan then went on to play at Baylor University, where he started as a freshman. After 2 years at Baylor, Logan decided to transfer to Davidson College. While at Davidson, Logan was a 2-year captain as well as a 2-time recipient of the Wildcat Award, given annually to Davidson's top rebounder. In his senior year, Logan captained the team to a perfect 16-0 conference record and an eventual quarterfinal loss to Maryland in the postseason NIT. For his play, he earned all-conference honors as well as being chosen for the All-State University team from North Carolina. Logan graduated in 2005 with a degree in psychology. After Davidson, Logan went on to play professionally across Europe in France, Poland, Germany, and Sweden. After 5.5 years playing professionally overseas, Logan retired to pursue pro skills basketball full-time in 2011 with his former Davidson teammate, Brendan Winters. Next week's Hoop Heads Pod webinar is with Tyler Whitcomb from West Michigan Aviation Academy, where we'll discuss teaching life lessons through basketball. You can buy lifetime access to any of our previous webinars for $4.99 on the Hoop Heads Pod website. If you're focused on improving your coaching and your team, we've got you covered. Visit hoopheadspod.com/webinars to get registered. Make sure you check out our new Hoop Heads Pod network of shows, including Thrive with Trevor Huffman, Beyond the Ball, the CoachMaze.com podcast, and our 2 newest shows, Players Court and Bleachers and Boards. We've also released our first 3 team-focused NBA podcasts, Cavaliers Central, Grizz and Grind, and Nuck If You Buck. We're looking for more NBA podcasters interested in hosting their own shows centered on a particular team. Reach out to us at info@hoopheadspod.com if you're interested in learning more and bringing your talent to our network. Have your notebook handy as you listen to this episode with Logan Kosmalski from Pro Skills Basketball in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hello and welcome to the Hoop Heads Podcast. It's Mike Linsling here without my co-host Jason Sunkel tonight, but I am pleased to be joined from Pro Skills Basketball, Logan Kosmalski. Logan, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate you having me.
Absolutely excited to have you on and dig into your basketball background all the way from when you were a kid up until what you're doing now with Pro Skills. So I wanted to start by going back in time when you were younger. Just talk to us about your first experiences with the game of basketball.
Well, man, I know everybody probably says this, but I was born into it. You know, my dad played college ball at the University of Tennessee, played in the NBA kind of in the mid-'70s for a couple of years. He's a big 7-footer, so and then I have an older brother who, you know, I watched him growing up from the time that I can remember playing and going to his games, and it was just kind of something natural that we got into. And I mean, I started playing in 2nd, 3rd grade. I always had a hoop in the driveway. I always wanted to beat my older brother and play games with my dad, my brother. So it's just been as long as I can remember.
How important was your older brother beating up on you in your ultimate development, do you think, as a player?
I just think it was a tremendous advantage for me. I didn't do anything to deserve having the older brother. But I mean, just wanting to be as good as him, just watching the way that he worked, and my brother, he's a college basketball coach now, at the D3 level, just an unmatched work ethic. And he's been like that since he was a kid. And I watched him work in our driveways. We would go to, open gyms together and outdoor courts. And he was just a worker. And I had no choice but if I wanted to be as good as him, I had to work as hard as him, if not harder. And yeah, I took my licks. I didn't beat him until I was in high school. But he had a great career. And like I said, just an incredibly hard worker. So it was just a tremendous advantage for me growing up as a basketball player.
What was it like when you caught up to him and you guys were sort of on more equal footing than it had been when you were younger? What was his reaction to that?
Oh, he wasn't happy. I mean, I'm a little bit bigger than he is, so I think by the time I was in high school, he went off to college and came home, and I was a little bit taller than he was, and I'd gotten stronger, and obviously a proud moment for me, but I think it's a moment he still doesn't give me credit for. When I first beat him in one-on-one, I think he'll deny it if you ask him. But no, I remember it, and it was a good feeling for me. And I think, as an older brother, as competitive as we were, he really looked after me and wanted me to become better. And he would challenge me, but he would also, celebrate my success. And he's always, for as hard as he works, he's always had the same perspective on what's important in life. And I think when I first beat him, he was as a competitor, not happy, but as an older brother who cared about my development, I think he was proud of me, and I think I earned a little bit of his respect.
Did you always know that he wanted to be a coach?
That's an interesting question. I just knew him as wanting to be a player, I knew he wanted to play in college. I knew he wanted to play professionally, which, he spent 4 or 5 years over in Europe playing. And to be honest, I don't remember when I came to the realization that he wanted to be a coach. And I'm not sure if he even knew until maybe he was playing professionally. I don't think there was that had been the goal for so long to see the world by using basketball or to make money through basketball, that I don't think he looked beyond that. I think he just grew up from a young age wanting to play and wanting to play professionally. And I think once he got to that age where you start looking past that and you realize that your days as a professional are limited, you kind of think, what's coming next? But now that I look back on it, coaching was, the obvious next move for him. Very knowledgeable, very strategic, very smart. And I think that just perfectly translated from being a player to becoming a coach.
The same or different for you?
Very different. I don't know why. I think I look at the lifestyle of a coach, and I love hoops and I love basketball and I love working with kids. But I want to have a little bit more control over my life, meaning, when I was overseas, I spent a few years playing overseas, which I'm sure we'll get to, but, when I looked at the life of a coach, and these guys make a lot of sacrifices and they paid their dues for a long time. And that can mean, working for a couple of years without making much money, or, going to places that they've never been to, or small towns in states where they've never been, just to be able to coach basketball. And, as much as I love basketball, I wanted to have a little bit more control over where I lived and what I did. So, and plus, I didn't have the drive to, remain in that competitive world. I'm still competitive, but I think once my days of basketball were coming to an end, I wanted to find a different outlet for my competitive nature, and I kind of wanted to, even though I ended up in basketball, it's more of kind of in the education business world is the way that I look at it. So I was just ready for a change, when it came to the end of my playing career. And so we're very similar, my brother and I, but in that respect, we're very different.
Yeah, I completely understand. And I think that I can relate to what you're saying in terms of wanting to find an outlet within the game of basketball, and yet maybe where coaching doesn't exactly fit or suit your personality. I know that even when I was coaching in high school, there was in a lot of ways I still thought of myself, and probably I would guess even today, with as long as I've been coaching at different levels, that there's still a part of me that I still think of myself more as a player than I do as a coach. So when I go to bed at night and I have dreams, those dreams are not about coaching. Those dreams are about still being a player. So I can completely relate to what you were saying. You were probably too young when your dad was playing. Have you ever had an opportunity to go back and watch film of your dad when he was playing in the NBA?
I haven't, to be honest. I think we found a few clips of him playing at the University of Tennessee. I mean, this was back in the early 70s, and I think he was drafted out of college like in 73, 74. I've seen a lot of pictures and posters and everything, but I've never seen a clip of him playing. As funny as it is, I think my dad, after his playing days are over, there's a lot of his career that he regrets. He wishes he could have done better, and he thinks he could have been better, even though he had an amazing basketball career. So I think, he always taught us growing up to, hey, this is what I didn't do, so this is what I want you to do. So maybe a little bit of that is involved with, us not being able to see a lot of video footage of him playing. But I also think it was probably just hard to come by back in those days.
Yeah, I think that the amount of video that's probably available from the early 70s, late 60s, kind of like those guys who are even the guys that we've heard of, in a lot of ways, they're ghosts in terms of the amount of highlights that you have of even some of the all-time greatest players. You've probably seen the same clips of Oscar Robertson or Wilt Chamberlain or Bill Russell. They run the same 7 or 8 clips on loop. Those are the ones you see. It would be really interesting to go back and be able to see more archival footage of players from that era, and I'm sure being able to see your dad play, if nothing else, you'd get a kick out of it at this point.
Yeah, absolutely. And now that I think about it, I don't know why I've never tried a little bit harder to dig into some archives and find some footage. So maybe once this is over, I'll be doing a little bit of research. There you go.
Hey, here on the podcast, we're inspiring people to get out and do basketball research. Nothing wrong with that. All right, so you're growing up and battling against your brother. At what point, as you're watching your brother kind of go through the steps of wanting to play college basketball and thinking about becoming a pro someday, at what point do those dreams, do those thoughts start entering your mind? And when does it become realistic that you start thinking, hey, I'm really going to have an opportunity to play beyond my high school career? When does that become obvious to you?
That's a good question. I think like every kid, my dream was growing up was to play in the NBA, and I was always, so I'm 6'8" now, and I was always bigger, growing up. I was always the biggest kid in my class, and I had a lot of success, just to, not to toot my own horn, but, I was from the time I was playing in our little league to, middle school and high school, success just kind of came easy for me at those levels. So I kind of always thought that, hey, maybe the NBA was attainable for me, and I wanted to go to college somewhere that was going to lead me to the NBA. So I don't remember a single occurrence when it was like, hey, I actually have a chance to do this. I actually think I took for granted, my step from high school to college, thinking that was just the next evolution of a career that was going to lead me to the NBA. But looking back, I wish I would have been more appreciative of earning a college scholarship, because now I realize what a blessing it is, and how actually rare that it is. But I think that might be the naive side or the downside of me growing up just around it. My dad played in the NBA, and my brother earned a college scholarship, and success for me came easily when I was younger. Which, in some respects made it harder for me, when I got to college and, got knocked to the mat a few times. But I don't remember a single time when I said, hey, that's that's what I want to do, is always just kind of there. And I remember watching, my brother be successful, but even the players that went to my high school that were older than my brother, that went off to big schools to play, I just knew that is what I wanted to do.
All right, so I want to take a quick tangent into your current role at Pro Skills, and then we'll come back to talk a little bit about your recruitment and how you ended up at Baylor. So when you're talking to parents of kids that are part of your program, I heard you mention that you didn't really understand how difficult it was to get a basketball scholarship. And you don't, at that time when you're a kid and you're the player, you don't necessarily see everybody else. You're only seeing your own situation. Mm-hmm. And for you, it seemed like it was almost predestined that you were going to be able to do that. But obviously with kids that are in your program, we know that that's not the case. So how do you get that message across to parents and players that you have to be really, really, really good to, let's talk about a Division I scholarship, but even if you're going to play Division III basketball, mm-hmm. how good you have to be to play at any level in the college game. Just talk about how you present that to parents and players who are part of Pro Skills.
Mm-hmm. It's a good question. I think the numbers don't lie. I don't know the stat right off the top of my head, but it's 1 to 2% of high school players get college scholarships. So it's not a lot, and so we really try to focus on those numbers, but more than anything, we try to make it about the process as opposed to the end result. One thing we really believe at Pro Skills is we really want to use what we do to try to develop a growth mindset of, the outcome is a byproduct of what you're doing now, and what you're doing now should be focused on getting better and learning and growing. And one reason I'm very passionate about that is because I feel like that's not what I had. And in some ways I don't have it now. I'm always looking for what's next. What am I striving to get? And I think, I've come to realize in my own life, when you do that, you're really neglecting where you are at that moment and what's good about the time period you're in. We've talked about my high school career and my, going off to college and starting the business and everything. And that's all great. But to me, what I remember most from my time of being a young player is not that, the success I had, but I played with my best friends and I went to different places to play in tournaments and I met so many different people. And I recognize that's the common thread. Those are the things that I really remember from my career. It's not, how many points I scored in this one game. I don't remember, a vast majority of the games that I played, or, what the scores were, or how many points I had. And I feel like as a young kid, I was so focused on that. And so I put so much pressure on myself to achieve this or to get to that level. And I feel like at that respect, you're putting undue pressure on a kid, and you're also doing them a disservice of what is in front of you right now. And what's our real objective here with basketball? Because if you start playing basketball with the standpoint of like, I'm going to do this because I'm going to go play in college and I'm going to make money, you're going to miss out on so many things, and you're going to look back. This is my theory, that if you end up like me, you're going to look back and be like, wow, I really neglected and I really didn't appreciate the process. The process is the reward. The process is everything. So I really want to help parents and help kids realize, like, hey, it's great that you have high expectations and big goals and big dreams, but let's also try to rein in our perspective and look at what we're doing now and what are the good things that are happening right now, and what can you learn from what is going on right now. And let's say that you don't play in college. If I told you weren't going to play in college right now, does that mean you're going to quit? You're not going to play? Because if you do that, you're going to miss out on a lot. And a lot of positive experiences, but a lot of like positive growth that you can take from basketball and any competitive sport and apply to the rest of your life.
I think that's a fantastic point. It's one that I've had discussions with coaches on here a few times about, and I've made the point that I think that in today's youth basketball culture, a lot of what we have is players and parents who are always, no matter where they are in the moment, their thought process, their focus is always on the next step. So if I'm a middle school player, I'm thinking about what high school am I going to go to? How am I going to get an opportunity to play at the varsity level in high school? And then once I'm a high school player, am I going to be a starter? Can I be an all-state player? And then once I achieve that, where am I going to go to school? And it's about the scholarship. And I'm in all these things, and we forget, you mentioned about the growth mindset and about enjoying the process and all that stuff. And I think that's so, so important. And just, I don't know about you, but when I look back on my high school career, you mentioned it, playing with your best friends, just getting an opportunity to go and travel to different places and play in tournaments. And I think when I think back to my high school experience, I don't know that basketball was ever more fun than it was during my time in high school. And so I think so many kids today are missing out on that fun piece of it because they put so much pressure on themselves to perform, as you said, to keep track of how many points am I getting and what's my average and who's calling me and who's talking to me. And parents are compounding that with the pressure that they're putting on their kids. And then you end up with a bunch of people who are just focused on what's going to happen a year from now or 2 years from now, instead of being like, hey, let's just enjoy playing in high school, because from the player's perspective, we all know that ends way too fast. And from a parent perspective, your child is 2 years old now. Well, it's going to be a blink of an eye and they're going to be 15. And it just goes so fast from a parent perspective that if you don't enjoy just going to games and watching your kids play and everything's about what's next, I think you get into some real dangerous territory. And I'm really glad when I get a chance to talk to people who are trying to change that message, to get people to understand that it's not about that pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Instead, it's about just enjoy what you're doing now. And try to maximize what you can, but don't get caught up in, if it doesn't work out, that you've wasted all that time.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, I think it's really hard, and I think you could attest to that. That is not the way that our American society is set up. Absolutely. We want winners, we want losers, or, there needs to be a winner, there needs to be a loser, there needs to be, good, bad, immediate results, or you're not going to be satisfied with losing a game. So I feel like it's kind of built into the way we are as Americans, where it's, we want, it's all about competing, and it's all about striving and ambition. And, and honestly, I think there's a big component of what do other people think about, if I lose these games, am I going to be thought of as a loser, or, so I think all of those things play into, what kids and parents think. And I think it's extremely difficult because I'm not trying to make myself sound like I'm completely over that part of it myself, because believe me, I'm not. But I think it takes practice. And I think the sooner that we can ingrain a mentality in kids and in parents to, like you said before, the chances of getting a college scholarship are so small. The chances of even making money play basketball are so small. Playing in the NBA, minuscule. And I played in college and I made money from basketball. And I want to tell people that my best times playing were before this. Yes, I'm proud of what I achieved in some respects, but also the most important things for me in basketball were what I learned from a young age, and the way that basketball challenged me, and the way I had to overcome obstacles, and also I had to learn to work with my teammates, and I made lifelong friends, and I got to see the world, and I got to travel to different places. None of that had to do with one particular game or one particular tournament. So it's been a we've been doing this for 10 years now, and it's been just an evolving process of we're really trying to change the culture of youth basketball, trying to really, have parents at the very least, just question, why are you signing your kid up to play basketball? And if it's if it's so that they can win a trophy on a weekend, or if it's because in 5 years you want to earn a college scholarship. I'm not saying that that's bad, but I'm saying I believe there needs to be a priority before the long-term, outcomes that you want to see. There needs to be a priority right now. I want my kid to be physically active. I want him to be around a good coach and a good mentor. I want him to make friends through basketball. And I think if we can get parents to approach from that perspective, it'll it'll lessen the pressure that they put on their kids, and we can teach them to handle losing and handle the disappointment that inevitably is going to come from playing basketball. I mean, you know that more than
for sure.
Like more people,
Absolutely.
like you are going to get your butt kicked sometimes. There are going to be games, weeks, entire seasons when you don't feel good about how you played or what you did. And if you don't have the love for basketball, or if you don't have the perspective on why you're doing it, then you're just not going to last long.
And I think the more that we can get that message in front of parents and players, and obviously that that's an uphill battle because there are a lot of organizations, groups, teams, however you want to phrase it, that are out there that are selling something completely different than the message that you just shared. And yet I think that there are a lot of good people and a lot of good organizations that are trying to do exactly what you described, which is to get people to see the value in the game in terms of the life skills that you can learn, the friendships that you can make, the physical fitness benefits that the game has. And sure, there's all these other things that go along with it. There's college scholarships, there's recognition, there's opportunities to continue your career at whatever level it is as you move from one level to the next. But yet ultimately, I think you'll attest to this, and we've already talked about it, that when you look back on your time playing basketball, what you remember are the moments with your friends, the things that you learned that helped you to develop the character that allowed you to be successful in what you're doing today and is going to continue to allow you to be successful throughout your life. And that's something that we sometimes get caught up in as parents. We let our perspective be lost, and we get so caught up in that moment of I've got to win this game, or my kid didn't get enough shots in this game, or the player comes home and says I was 1 for 10 and this scout was in the stands trying to watch me play at that particular moment. And we forget this bigger picture of really what it should be all about.
Yeah. And again, I can't stress this enough. Like I do not mean to say this thing as if I'm on the high horse because I am.
I get it.
And I hope anybody listening, it's been a lifelong struggle for me to gain that perspective and to realize, I think our sports world in particular is, hey, you lose a game, like you need to feel really bad. If you're okay with losing, then there's something wrong with you, or you're a loser. And I think it's, I think we can begin to, if we can just sort of question that mentality, even a little bit, that, the outcome of a single game or even a tournament is if we can just gain a little bit more perspective on what our kids are doing and why they're doing it and what the chances are of any sort of long-term, jackpot of college or NBA, I think parents need to ask themselves if we guaranteed you that is not going to happen, are you still going to invest in your kid playing in the sport? And if the answer is yes, because of all the positives, then that's great. And that's what we want. But again, much easier said than done, because I'm competitive. I don't like to lose. And I think it's going to be a hard culture to change.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think people, as you said, are competitive. And I know it, just speaking for myself, as I transitioned back a long time ago from playing to coaching, you quickly realize that not every player reacts to losing the same way that you reacted to losing as a player. And so it took me a long time to adjust to those kids who could bounce back 30 seconds after they lost and didn't seem like anything. And you would, at the time, you'd question, you'd be like, how can this kid be going on and just living his life? I was down for 24 hours or 36 hours or however long it took for me to get back out there and redeem myself. So as you said, I can certainly relate to that mentality. And yet, as you look at it, you're like, I'm not sure that was neccerily always the healthiest.
Had a healthier mentality than you did, right?
For sure. Exactly. Yeah. I'm not sure that that's the healthiest mentality to adopt. You certainly wouldn't want to push that onto anyone else. But generally speaking, I think that what you guys are trying to do and what we've been trying to do with the podcast is just get people to understand that don't chase the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. Instead, enjoy the rainbow itself and really just enjoy the game and try to use it to make yourself a better person, help your kid become a better person, stay healthy, stay active, make friends. And if you do that, you're going to be in the right place. So let's leave that behind for a second.
Okay. Yeah.
And let's go back to your playing career and just tell us a little bit about how you ended up at Baylor, what your recruitment was like.
My recruitment was, I played varsity from the time I was a sophomore. I grew up in Texas, so, our high school, we were on the junior high system. So our junior high was 7th, 8th, and 9th grade. And then high school was sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So, I was being recruited from the time that I was a sophomore by some pretty mid-level schools. And by the time, after my junior year, Baylor was in the Big 12, and Dave Bliss had just come from the University of New Mexico, and it was an hour and a half from my my hometown in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I wanted to play at the biggest stage that I could. Again, I thought that was my transition to the NBA was, I needed to play at a big time basketball conference, and I thought, Dave Bliss was going to come in and turn Baylor around, just as he had at a few other, SMU and the University of New Mexico. So, but besides Baylor, it was a lot of mid-major schools. My brother played at Davidson, and Davidson was towards the top of the list when I was coming out of high school, along with schools like Santa Clara and SMU. So a lot of mid-major schools. But at the end of the day, I really liked Davidson coming out of high school, but I was just a little bit, I won't say blinded. I was just swayed by the playing in the Big 12, playing close to home, and taking a chance on a coach that had been successful and building a big time program.
So when you get there, what's the adjustment like, both from an academic and off-court experiences, and then what was your adjustment like on the court as a player?
Yeah. Going off again, I want to hand it to my brother. He really helped prepare me for what life was going to be like, transitioning from high school to college. But I think like anybody, it took me a while to adjust to being on my own. And, I lived in an off-campus apartment as a freshman with another freshman roommate. And, we had to cook our own meals or get our own food and get ourselves to practice and everything, which is, it wasn't really a big problem for me, but it was just transitioning to an environment where I was the youngest on campus again. I was a freshman, and playing against bigger, stronger, more experienced guys on the court, and having to, take care of myself off the court. So, it was definitely a transition, and I think I adjusted, pretty well. I think it definitely opened my eyes, and there were definitely some adjustments I had to make, but for the most part, on the court and off the court, I was okay when I first got to Baylor.
What would you say, if you were looking back on that time, what was your favorite moment from your years at Baylor?
When my freshman year, we beat Kansas when Kansas was like number 5 in the country, and it was at home. It was at home at Baylor, and it was on ESPN, and all the fans rushed the court, and it was a big win for us, and it was it was very, very memorable. But even again, that was one game our freshman year that I remember. But even off the court, one thing I will say, I ended up transferring from Baylor after 2 years. After a while, just I became to realize it just wasn't a place for me. But even in that respect, I made some really great friends, and I really appreciated the academics at Baylor. I was challenged in the classroom as well, which I liked, and academics were important to me. So, one instance would be that Kansas game, but just overall, the friendships and that I made with, not only a few guys in the team, but more even just people that were a part of the student body. I really did cherish that time.
When you decide to transfer, why Davidson?
You know, I just, one reason I wanted to leave Baylor, it was, you know, my playing time had really gone down. Baylor had recruited a kid named Lawrence Roberts out of Houston, who ended up, you know, playing in the NBA and had a great career overseas. Really talented player. So he really came in and took a lot of my playing time, which led to a lot of frustration. And then, you know, even on the basketball team, our locker room wasn't the most cohesive. And, you know, I told you growing up, I played high school with like all my best friends, and going into a locker room where I was not only the youngest, but I was also, you know, I only had like, you know, 2-3 really good friends in the basketball team, and everybody else just kind of went their separate ways and did their own thing. That I really missed that. And that's what really struck me on my first trip out to Davidson is the guys on the team that was their group. You know, they competed on the court together, they practiced together, and they shared those struggles. But off the court, you know, that was who they went out with on the weekends, and that's who they studied with on the weeknights. So it was a really cohesive unit. I'd obviously known Coach McKillop at Davidson from the time that he recruited my brother. My brother had a really good experience at Davidson. It was the right level for him, and I thought I could do well at that level. And I was familiar with the town and the region of North Carolina. So, you know, it was a lot about the coaching staff and a lot about the team.
All right, let me ask you this. So you're talking about the locker room and the way that the Davidson team was together and unified as a group, and maybe Baylor was not the same way. Mm-hmm. How much of that do you attribute to the coaching staff making that happen versus just the guys who make up that locker room? So I'm just curious, in your mind, how much do you think a coach, and maybe not even specific to those two situations, but just think about in general, how much do you think a coach can facilitate that, and how much of it do you think is just attributed to the guys who are on the roster?
I think it's mainly Coach McKillop. I think he looks for guys that will you know, have a certain you know, character and will be a part of a cohesive team and will gel well with who he's already got in his locker room. He does not want anybody coming into his locker room that's going to cause friction or become a cancer. And I think that's a really smart coaching strategy on his part. And I think he wants to surround himself with good guys that will work hard. But I also think, you know, you mentioned the players. It definitely is the players, but it's also a culture that he's built that, you know, Davidson has been that way since, you know, he's been there. He worked really hard to instill into his locker rooms, and it's something that the older guys passed on to the younger guys. When you got there, like, hey, we are going to compete, we're going to work hard, and we're going to, you know, be there for each other off the court and on the court. And that's just what it means to play basketball at Davidson. And you learn that when you first come in, and it's your responsibility to teach that to the young guys when they arrive and you're older.
Yeah, I think so much of it has to do with the culture that the coach is able to set up. And I think as you go around and you look at different programs, and it doesn't matter what level you're talking about. You can be talking about 5th grade AAU, you can be talking about high school, you can talk about college, you can talk about the NBA. And so much of that culture is set by being intentional in the way you go about things. And that could be the type of players that you bring into your program. It can be the way that you set things up and just how you go about your business day to day. It's amazing to me just when you see the right culture, when you see good cultures, it's just, it feels like it's almost effortless. And yet, you know, that the amount of work that it took for that coach, that coaching staff to be able to get it to be like that is just incredible. And I always think that, you know, when you really see great cultures, a lot of people take that for granted. And I think the people who have been in athletics, and again, we're not just talking about basketball, goes across sports, that it just takes so much effort on the part of that coach and their coaching staff to be able to instill those kinds of cultures. So I wanted to ask you, when you transfer in and you have your year that you have to sit out, how difficult was that year for you, sitting out, going through practice, not knowing that you didn't have an opportunity to play? Because I know I came in my freshman year and I didn't play very much, maybe, 5-6 minutes a game. And there were times where practice got really, really tough when I didn't feel like that carrot of playing time was dangling out there at the end. And I had an opportunity to play. You obviously had no opportunity to ever get on the court because you're sitting out. So just talk a little bit about what that year was like for you.
Well, Mike, this is probably not going to be a positive opinion on my end, but I think it was great for me, and I actually really enjoyed it. Because of a few things, because of my experience at Baylor and because of, the way that my basketball career unfolded, I put so much pressure on myself to be good and to, win games and, score this many points and do this, that, when I left Baylor and I was part of a cohesive team at Davidson, it was kind of like I was able to just take a little bit of pressure off myself. I knew I wasn't going to play. I could go to a game and just enjoy it. I had sort of lost that at Baylor and even back in high school, I was nervous before games, and it was, so as much as I enjoy basketball and I love basketball, I really felt I got to a point where I put so much pressure on myself that it lost a little bit of the enjoyment. And coming into Davidson, knowing I wasn't going to be able to play in the night, but still I was going to be there for my team and I was going to sit on the bench. I actually enjoyed it. And then I got to a point where I was like, okay, I realize what's been happening to me and I'm ready to do this again, so it kind of allowed me to recharge and just be a normal student for a while in some respects. And it also kind of showed me like what I was missing. So once that year was over, and it became harder as the season went along. Okay, I was like, okay, I'm ready to play. I'm tired of watching. I'm tired of cheering. Like, I know I could help doing this and doing that on the court during these games. So I was ready. In all those respects, I think it was a great opportunity for me. And I know it can paint the picture of, I wasn't as competitive as I needed to be or what have you. But, in that respect, I was in a new place around really good people, and I could take some pressure off of myself for, a couple of months. I was happy for a while. But like I said, towards the end, I was ready to go again. And so in those respects, I think my transfer year was, just all positives.
Yeah, it was like a reset for you. Get your battery recharged, get you ready to go. So when you get into the next season and now you're obviously eligible to play, how hard was your motor running at that point to be able to get back out on the floor and actually contribute in a game and not just on the practice floor?
Well, I was terrible. I think I fouled out of our first, 5 or 6 games of the season. I was just slow. I hadn't played at that speed in a long time and at that intensity with the crowd. So it took me about half the season to adjust to the speed and get my touch back and get my footwork back. So, it took me a while. In that respect, that was very frustrating because I had such high hopes coming off of my redshirt year. But I was just rusty, and I was, the rust kind of got to me and it kind of hurt my confidence a little bit. But, mid-season to, towards the end of the first semester, I feel like I kind of got back into my groove a little bit and it felt good to play again. And it felt, I felt like I had gotten better from all those things I had done in my redshirt year. But it was difficult.
So if you think back to those 2 years, what was maybe a highlight or two? And again, this doesn't necessarily have to be this big game that you had, but just when you think of those 3 years at Davidson, what's the first thing that you think of? I can guess, but I'm just going to let you go ahead and answer it.
You can guess? Well, no, I'm interested in what you guess.
I'm gonna guess your teammates are what you remember.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, okay. For sure, my teammates. Brendan Winters, who's my business partner at Pro Skills. I met him my first day on Davidson campus, and it was just a completely different vibe. We, like I said, we did everything together. We would, we had Davidson so small that I was, in some of the same classes as my teammates, and we'd. And at Davidson and Coach McKillop, like you were working hard, there's a lot of hard work. And I think, the challenge and the struggle to get through those difficult, whether or not it's small group workouts in the preseason or, going to the track to do some conditioning or even in season practices, like you are challenged both mentally and physically. And I think that sort of creates a brotherhood amongst Davidson guys who kind of all go through that together, and we, have to lean on each other to get through that at times. Which just means you become really close to your teammates, and I'm still very close to a lot of them to this day. So yeah, without a doubt, my teammates at Davidson, and I will say, going back to, I was really challenged in the classroom at Davidson, which I really I really got to appreciate. It was, even though I'd been at Baylor in the university system for 2 years, when I got to Davidson, it was like I was a freshman again. It was just a different educational academic environment that took me a while to adjust to. But looking back, I really appreciate how I was challenged to think critically in my time at Davidson in the classroom.
All right, so this is a two-part question related to what you're talking about there, and that is, what was obviously you still are thinking that you're going to have an opportunity to play professional basketball, so we can talk about that and just sort of what your plans were as your career's winding down. But then also, you've mentioned your academics a couple times. So if you were thinking about your career beyond basketball, what were you thinking about academically in terms of something that you thought, hey, if my playing career is over, this is the area that I might want to go in for my next career? So just maybe talk about those two aspects. Yeah.
When I was at Baylor, I had started I was really thinking about pre-med, but then I really decided on like physical therapy. I thought about working with athletes and helping them, recover from injury. So physical therapy was really something I was interested in from my time at Baylor. But once I got to Davidson, the challenge of the classroom and balancing the classroom and basketball I would have had to take in some really serious classes with some, really intensive labs and everything. So, I as much as I loved it, I didn't think that was probably the best bet for me coming into a new place. So, I settled on psychology, which was a really interesting subject for me, and I really came to like it. And at that point, I didn't really have a thought of like, what's my degree in psychology going to allow me to do once I'm done playing basketball. I just knew that was one subject that I was actually, somewhat passionate about, and I enjoyed learning about it. And it allowed me to survive my time at Davidson. And then, I figured, hey, I knew I was going to go play professionally somewhere once my time at Davidson was over. At what level, what that was, I didn't know. But that ended up working out for me, and it gave me some time to think about life post-basketball.
All right, so let's go right into that. How does the opportunity to play professionally, how does that come to pass? Do you sign with an agent when the season's over? Are you talking to people that have contacts in other countries? Are you talking to anybody NBA-wise? Just give us a feel for what that process was like as you complete your eligibility and graduate from Davidson.
This is a surprisingly unsophisticated story. I had there was a former Davidson guy that was playing in France. His coach was going to move to a different team and was looking for players. I sent him a tape, and they offered me a contract. That was really at that time. I can't speak to it now if it's changed or not, but at that time, the scouting that, mid to lower level European teams did was very minimal. I sent one tape of one game, and I was offered a contract. So that's how I came to get my first job, and it was, I graduated at the beginning of May, and I signed my contract, about 3 days after my graduation. So I had, a couple of months before I had to go off to Europe, and I was prepared to wait around all summer and have to go to some tryouts or maybe even go to some camps over in Europe, but it worked out for me really quickly. So I was lucky in that respect.
All right, two questions. What did you do to prepare yourself between that moment when you signed the contract until you went to Europe? And then two, when you get to France, what's that adjustment like for you living in a foreign country, both from a basketball and an off the court standpoint?
Yeah, well, so sorry, to prepare for my time again, I'll mention my brother again. He had played overseas for a couple of years, and he really helped mentally prepare me for what I needed to do. And at Davidson, I was all about playing my role, and my role was to, defend and rebound. And I scored points, but I wasn't like a primary scorer or a primary shooter. So, given my brother's experience, he strongly advised me, like, as an American, when you go over to Europe, they're going to be looking for you to score. So I really spent those couple of months really trying to, work off the dribble and focus on, making shots around the basket that maybe I had struggled with at Davidson. I knew I needed to become a better scorer and develop a little bit of a stronger scorer's mentality in order to really do well over in Europe as an American. So, that was a couple of months I spent before I went over there, and it really did help me once I got over there. But you mentioned the adjustment to life in a foreign country. That was an experience really unlike any other. I landed in a plane and two guys at the airport to meet me that didn't really speak English, and I just hopped in the car with them and trusted they were going to take me where I needed to go, and trying to communicate with people who didn't really speak and trying to get used to their customs. And in France, it was kind of eye-opening when anytime you enter a room in France, you shake everybody's hand all the time, every single day. So it was just little things, little customs that it took a while to get used to. But again, some advice my brother gave me from being over there was I really relished that. I was actually really looking forward to that. So at times it was frustrating. But for me, and I advise guys going over to Europe now, if you embrace that and really respect that it's, hey, this is their country, this is what they do, and the more you sit there and think about how weird it is or how uncomfortable it is, that that's going to come across to the people that you're around, and it's going to seem disrespectful to their culture. So I really tried to be proactive in learning the language and learning the customs and really diving into the way that they lived, and it really did help me, and I was able to adjust pretty quickly. Now there were definitely some times of being locked out of my apartment, or the washing machine wasn't working and I had to grab a dictionary or bumble my way through a conversation. But for the most part, man, it opened my mind to the fact that people live differently throughout the world, and just because it's not what you're used to doesn't mean that it's weird or it's wrong. And in a lot of ways, if you can approach it that way, you'll learn that, hey man, in some other countries, they do things better than we do here. And it starts to make you question, why do we do this in where I come from? And maybe this is better. So it really did, change the way I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the opportunity to go and immerse yourself in a foreign culture and be able to integrate into that and have it be your livelihood, and then just to be able to interact with the people there and learn the culture and learn the customs, as you talked about, I'm sure was amazing. And then you had an opportunity to play in multiple countries while you were over there, so you're adjusting to multiple cultures each time you change and start playing in a different country. So of all the places that you played, did you have a favorite country, city, your favorite experience in one of those countries or cities that you had?
I spent 2 years in a city called Nantes, France, which is, not a lot of Americans know it, but it's the 5th largest city in France, and it's a big area with, I think over 1 million people. So it's a big city, which I really liked. But I think at the end of the day, my favorite was Germany. I played in Dusseldorf, Germany for 2 years. I ended up meeting my wife there at the end of my first year, and I just came to love the German culture, and it was obviously a little bit easier. A lot of Germans speak English, or they embrace English speakers because they want to learn English. But it reminded me a lot of home, with a lot of subtle differences, with a lot of big differences, but a lot was the same. So, and Germans, as there's kind of a saying over there that, a German stranger is a stranger, but a friend is like a friend for life. And once you get to know Germans, and once you really connect with them on a deeper level, like they are loyal, lifelong friends. And I really connected with the German people and the German culture. And I speak a little German today, obviously because of my wife, but that is someplace if we ended up moving to Germany, I would be completely happy and on board, because I really do feel like it's my second home.
That's very cool. I got a buddy who I went to college with. He wasn't a basketball player, but he ended up marrying someone who was from England, and they lived here in the United States for a number of years after they got married. And then he ended up going and moving with her to England, and just, not obviously to the same degree with, you don't have the language barrier and those similar things, but nonetheless, he packed up and moved over there with his wife and immersed himself in that culture. And, he's raising his two daughters are being raised, English. I think the one was born here, but the other two are just, they don't know any different. And so it's really just, again, it's very interesting when you think about those things. And I got to ask you, and this is a question that is probably my favorite question to ask on the podcast. What is your favorite, craziest European basketball story? Because everybody has a crazy story of some whacked out weird thing that happened to them while they were there. And you can you got to keep it PG-13, let's say. How about that? Yeah, well, I mean, so I told this story on one of our podcasts too, and I'll just recycle it here because it is appropriate, and it is just overall strange, So I spent a few months in Poland, and I was at a training camp with my Polish team, and we went off to a small village kind of out, away from our city, and so we're at this training camp. It's surrounded by these woods, and there's not a lot around it. And one day we were supposed to go on a recovery hike, and we were going to practice that night. So the afternoon, like, hey, let's just all go on a walk as a team, and we're going to walk through the woods. Sounded innocent enough. And then, we're walking for about, 30, 45 minutes out in this woods. And all of a sudden I realized, only half of our group is there. And then all of a sudden it's just, 3 or 4 guys, and it's me. And then I ended up with, it's me and like 2, 3 Polish guys. And I started to realize, we are lost. Our teammates are gone, our coaches are gone, and we are in the middle of these Polish woods, and we don't know where we are, and I was okay, but we were out there for a couple of hours, and we started to, luckily we came, and I started to get nervous when I realized my Polish teammates were nervous, and in my head I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to be sleeping out. And how cold is it going to get out in these Polish woods? I might be sleeping out here, and I might, is my body going to be found, a couple of weeks from now? But we ended up, coming along a fisherman on a river, and he pointed us in the direction of where we needed to go, and we had to walk about an hour back, and we got back, right before sundown, and the coach was like, "Oh, where were you guys?" And to them it was kind of no big deal, but for me, I was going through, all these different scenarios in my head as I was lost out in these Polish woods for about 3 or 4 hours. That is classic. The other guys Houdini'd on you, they just disappeared.
Yeah, to this day, I don't know how it happened, but we got separated, and it was a little bit intense for a couple hours.
That's one, Logan, where you need a drone footage of where the guys were, where did these guys drop, where did people drop off, and how did we end up all by ourselves?
I know. I should Google map it and see where we were, actually.
There you go. That's funny. I love hearing those stories because everybody has one, and none of them are usually the same. Like, they all are just some form of strange something that went on. So I love hearing those. I think one day I'm going to just compile those into like a Tales of European Basketball podcast.
Yeah,
just do a little summary, because there's some classics. All right. Yeah. So let's move from that. I want to make sure that we get a little bit of time to talk about pro skills. Mm-hmm. So I've talked to Brendan about it, but I want to just hear your perspective on how you guys got started. I know you came back and you had played together both at Davidson, and then you played a year together overseas in Sweden. And so then you guys come back with the idea that, hey, we just want to start a little basketball camp, and it kind of grows from there. So just kind of give us the rundown from your perspective.
Yeah, so, it came. Brendan and I, we were obviously very close at Davidson, and I, even in the time at high school, I worked a camp in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and it was run by a former my former high school coach that I knew, and the camp was owned by this guy who I came to realize, like, this is what this guy does. He runs like basketball and football camps throughout the summer. That's what he does for his full-time job. And it just struck me as like, man, that'd be awesome. I loved camps, and what a great way to make money. So as I, again, I was coming to the end of my professional career, kind of questioning what was next, and the thought of, running a camp just to make some extra money while I was home for, between European stints. But also, I'd always loved working with kids, and I loved camps. So we tried to put one together, and it failed the first year, and we kind of regrouped and tried one again the next year, and it went well, and kind of struck a chord with, the people, in the Davidson community with the camp that we ran. So, and another part of this is there was another former basketball player at Davidson named Billy Armstrong, who was up in New York running a full-time, basketball club. And, I spent some of my time overseas in Sweden, kind of thinking about how it works, and what do these numbers look like, and what do you offer, and what goes into running this business. And the deeper I got into it, the more convinced that it was something I wanted to do. And, and Brendan and I, shared in those duties, and there was a lot for us to do. And I think in some ways I kind of convinced him to let's give this thing a shot and see if we can make it our full-time jobs. And, that's how it got started, man. And we've tried, especially in the early years, we tried everything. We were doing a lot of training, a lot of camps, a lot of clinics, a lot of one-on-one training and small group training and weekend academies and things of that nature. And so we've been through a lot of revisions over our 10 years, and we finally found a model that we think is really beneficial for kids and works for us as a business. So that's how it got started, man, 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's hard to believe, I'm sure.
I know.
What was the vision like at the beginning in terms of, was it more just, hey, we want to have a basketball business, and as you said, you just kind of kept throwing stuff at the wall to see what stuck, both in terms of what people wanted and in terms of what you guys wanted to do? Is that kind of how you were approaching it? Or did you have a vision that this is what we want to do, but it didn't exactly pan out the way we expected it to? Just maybe talk about how it's sort of morphed over time.
Well, when we first started, we really didn't want to get into the AAU team side of everything. Just for a couple of reasons. We just didn't think that was something that we wanted to do. And then, I've told this story about a million times over the last 10 years, but there was a seventh grade girl that I was working with, as back in the early days, we did a lot of one-on-one training with her. And one weekend, to support her, I went to watch one of her AAU games at a gym just like right around the corner from my house. And when I was there, I was just, I couldn't believe how toxic the environment was. I was, 28, 29 years old. I hadn't been to, any of these games in a long time. And I was at this gym trying to support this, 12, 13-year-old girl. And I just, the coaches were just screaming at the players, and the players were yelling at the refs, and the parents were yelling at this. And it really just hit me. And I was like, this is just not what this should be about. And this is not the environment that we should be creating for our kids to really use the game of basketball to learn and to thrive. So I walked out of the gym, and I was pretty convinced. I was like, hey, we're going to start some AAU teams, and we're going to make them different, because this is what's going on right now, especially in our area. Like, if it's based on this one game, I see that it's headed in the wrong direction. And we wanted to really be agents of change when it came to, how parents viewed these, how coaches interacted with their players, and really, again, was what we talked about at the beginning. Like, what was this all about, and why are these kids playing? So, I was really struck by the atmosphere at that game, and it really convinced me that, hey, we need to do something about this. We need to start our own teams, and it hasn't been the same since then.
So when you start to make that transition after a couple years, where clearly in the early time you're spending a lot of your efforts out on the court, and you're working with kids directly, and you're the one instructing, you're the one coaching, you're the one running the camp. But eventually, as your organization grows, you sort of have to shift from a basketball coach, trainer, camp director mode into becoming more of a business owner. And not that you're not still involved in the basketball side of it, but clearly there becomes a lot more of the business things that you have to do, whether that's hiring, whether that's putting together your organization, whether that's marketing, whatever it may be. So when you started to make that transition, one, was it a transition that you enjoyed is maybe the wrong word, but was it a transition that you kind of felt like, hey, this is something new that I'm adding to my plate. I'm learning something that is going to continue to help me to grow. So that's the first part of the question. Then the second part of the question is, was there one part of the business side of it that you really tended to gravitate towards more than others?
I think, so going back to the first question, it was very hard. It had been, 4 or 5 years of, we had grown our business to include teams. And I realized that if we were ever going to achieve our vision, and Brendan and I both realized this, that we could not think that we were the best coaches and we were going to coach those teams and have a direct impact on the kids ourselves. What we needed to do, we needed to create an environment and create a culture amongst our coaches that if we can in any way recreate ourselves through our coaches and then allow our coaches to go off and have the direct impact on the kids, we can impact a lot more kids and create a lot more change by doing that. So, and that was the part of the business that really I gravitated towards, was how are we going to find, what are we looking for in our coaches? How are we going to find them? How are we going to evaluate them for these characteristics that we're looking for? And then how are we going to integrate our culture into them and tell them like what we're about? And, how do we give them freedom to go off and be their own coach while at the same time uphold the standards that we wanted for our business and for our club? And again, I'm still learning and I'm still trying to, improve upon that and do it at a different level now. But for me, that was the way that I was going to have the impact that I really want. I loved coaching my teams. And I might be different here, but I could coach a 4th or 5th grade basketball team, girls or boys, and I just loved coaching the young kids. And even dealing with the parents and being on the sidelines, like that's what I love. So when I started to break that direct contact with the players, because I was around all the time, I knew all the players, I knew their families, but I realized that I couldn't continue that and also recreate and train coaches and do the same thing. So eventually it couldn't just be about me. It couldn't just be about Brendan. It had to be about the club. It had to be about our culture. And that meant stepping back and not having the close a bond with a lot of the players and a lot of the families. And that was really hard. That was really difficult. And I know it left a bad impression on some people who, I went from being around all the time to being around a little bit less and less to, now a lot of our players and parents don't even know who I am. And that is difficult, and I don't necessarily like it, but I think it's what's necessary if we are going to empower our coaches and our managers and our city directors to be the agents of change. I can't be the one person having my ego hang over everybody. I had to remove myself, and my change had to come through the people that I was hiring and training and allowing and sending out there to have the direct contact with the players and their families.
So how do you instill that culture? How do you instill what made you personally successful and the things that you did well? How do you instill that into the people and coaches that you're bringing into your organization? How do you make sure that they're going to uphold the values and the things that you want to make sure that you're getting across to the players and families that are part of your program? What's the training look like?
It's I don't know. No, again, it's always a work in progress for us. I think we found our little bit of a stride now. And I remember I read a book a long time ago that told the story of Herb Kelleher, the former CEO of Southwest Airlines, and he always had the phrase, he's like, I hire for character and I train for skill. And that really resonated with me as I started going out and hiring people. So what took us a really long time, and I'm still working on, is like, how do we articulate these characteristics that we're looking for? Like, what are we actually looking for? And we need to articulate them. And then we need to learn how to evaluate for them. And then we need to learn how to train them. And I really look at it as a learning experience, because we hire we look for character, in our coaches, but also too, like, I realized as a coach, I wasn't perfect. And I don't think any of the coaches that we hire are going to be perfect. Our hope is that they come into coaching with the same growth mindset that we have. They need to realize they're not perfect coaches. And it's been really cool that this organic sort of group, especially, in some of our larger cities like Denver, Colorado, and then in Charlotte, North Carolina, and Nashville, Tennessee, like, we have a pretty large stable of coaches that they become their own teaching. They learn from each other, and they hold each other accountable, and if a couple of guys mirror the culture, like, the other coaches like follow their lead. So it's been a really cool organic, growth mindset sort of culture that's sort of taken over our bigger cities. And again, we're not perfect. Not all of our coaches are perfect. Sometimes they lose their temper, or they get technicals, or we don't expect anybody to be perfect. But at the end of the day, we want to hire guys of good character, that are reliable, and that share our perspective of why they want to coach these things. So that's one of the main, like, why do you want to coach? Because if you want to coach to win games and prove what a great coach you are, that's not really what we're looking for. I understand it, but we're looking for something a little bit deeper. We're looking for guys that want to impact the lives of kids. We look for guys that love the game and want to help teach those life lessons through basketball. People that will be positive with the kids, but also hold them accountable. They have that knack for finding that balance, and that's a difficult thing. So at the end of the day, they're educators, they're mentors, they're leaders, and they need to be of high character, and they need to be reliable.
I think that's all great stuff. I'm sure it's challenging. I'm sure back when you guys first started that it wasn't something that was on your mind that you were ever going to have to do or be involved in. And I know when I talked to Brendan, he just talked about how much he enjoyed the process of sort of becoming an entrepreneur on the fly, when that necessarily wasn't what you guys started out with the idea that you were going to do. Mm-hmm. But you had to learn all these different skills kind of along the way to be able to have the type of success that you want to have. Before we wrap up, Logan, I want to give you, I want to ask a couple more questions. The first one is just about what you guys have done during COVID-19. And I talked to Brendan about it at length, but I just want to get your perspective on maybe a minute or two, just about what you guys have done to sort of bridge that gap between being able to offer in-person instruction and games to kids just sitting at home doing nothing. Yeah.
I mean, it's exactly that, Mike. I mean, it's so I know you and Brendan talked about a lot of the virtual things that we're doing. We've done a lot of virtual camps, which have been really cool to see. Not only are our kids able to get in front of a camera and do drills and challenge themselves physically, and also practice some of the skills of basketball, but more than anything, like those kids need to connect, and they need to connect with coaches, and they need to connect with mentors, and even virtually that allows them to do it in some respects. And so we've really gone heavy into the virtual things, both because it's what we need to do to survive, but also we think that it has its own value to it, and it's important that we do it right now. But the other part about it is we understand that people want to play, and they want to be in person, they want to play games, they want to go to these tournaments, they want things to be like they were before. But the sad truth of where we're at is like, that's just not possible, so trying to help people come to grips with hopefully this is all over tomorrow. We can wake up tomorrow morning and, there's a vaccine and we're playing games next week, but I don't think that that's going to happen. And I think that the sooner parents and players can come to grips with the fact hey, I might not be able to do this for a while, or maybe I'm doing it now and I might, there are some places that are doing it, and if there's one of the places, that's great. But I think it's important for parents and players to if I'm not able to play in tournaments right now, there is still some things that I can be doing that are of importance and are of value. And we hope that they do them with us because we think we have a lot to offer. But I think, people need to start coming around to like things are just different right now, and we're trying to do what's possible. And there is some value to that, even though it's not exactly what you wanted, it's not the way things have been in the past. There are still a lot of positives that can come from being a part of anything virtual or even taking part of basketball that's not in a tournament or game atmosphere.
That's a great perspective to be able to share with people. And I think the longer this thing goes on, you hope that more and more people are going to start to adopt that mentality and just say, look, we're not getting to do the things that we'd all love to be able to be back to doing, but there are other ways that we can continue to interact with the game. And when guys like you are putting things out there for kids to be able to do and to give them an opportunity to keep working on their skills and to keep staying physically fit and still have those interactions with the people who are part of your organization, that's really what it's all about. I want to ask you this last question, and we're going to momentarily wipe away COVID-19 and imagine that we're back to normal. And as you look forward beyond that time when the pandemic is over and you can get back to sort of business as normal, what do you see as your biggest challenge or opportunity moving forward with pro skills?
I think it's doing what we talked about then. It's just our training and our culture and instilling that in new people, and that's an ever evolving animal in its own right. It's always changing, and there's always new people that are coming into the fold and changing dynamics, and we might even come to change our perspective a little bit in the next couple of years, depending on what's happened. And we need to be open to that, and we need to learn and grow from what we did in the past. So I think being an entrepreneur or being a coach, it's never stagnant. It's always what just happened and what do we learn from that, and how do we change it going forward? How do we build onto it going forward? So it's just that growth mindset of always trying to learn from past experiences and enjoy them, but also learn from them and grow and become better. So, but I do think the difficulties of managing a growing business with more coaches and more people involved and more moving parts is a challenge, and it's become the fun part about everything. But that will be our challenge in the future. Should we be able to get back on the court sometime soon, is just maintaining our culture and what we built while also growing and having more people, more coaches, and more moving parts.
Well, let's cross our fingers and hope that it's sooner rather than later that all those challenges can present themselves to you, so you can fight through it just like the rest of us, and we can get back to what we all want to do, which is to be out on the basketball floor. Before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to share where people can get in touch with you, where they can find out more about pro skills. Just give us the best ways to get in touch with you.
Mike, I'm an old school guy. I'm not really on social media that much, but I'll answer any email that comes to my inbox. My email is just logan@proskillsbasketball.com. So yeah, anybody that wants to reach out to us there. You can also contact us through our website, just proskillsbasketball.com, and we have a comment section there. I've written some blogs. You could comment on those blogs and listen to our podcast that we have on our website, but really email and our website are the best ways.
Fantastic. I'll say this. I said it to Brendan, and I'll say it to you. I think you guys are doing things the right way. And anybody who's listened to the Hoopheads pod and then listened to what you guys have had to say on here know that the philosophy that I'm trying to bring to youth basketball and basketball in general dovetails almost exactly with what you guys are trying to do and the type of culture that you're trying to instill in youth basketball throughout the country. So you're you're a group that's doing things the right way, and I think that shows in the success that you've been able to have and the way your program has grown in such a short amount of time. And just keep up the good work. You guys are doing great things, and I'm proud to be able to have you guys a part of what we've been able to do here with the Hoopheads pod, and to have both Brendan on and now to have you on. It's an honor for us to have you guys be a part of it. So I just want
thanks,
to say
Mike.
thanks for
Yeah,
you. Absolutely.
I really appreciate that. Congratulations to you and what you've built. And, again, the more people out there fighting the fight to change youth basketball is the more people, the better. So I appreciate what you're doing as well.
Well, I appreciate that. And I just want to say thanks to you for spending an hour or so with us tonight. And it was a lot of fun getting to know you, and looking forward to sharing the episode when that time comes. And to everyone out there, thanks for listening, and we will catch you on our next episode. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Hoop Heads podcast, presented by Head Start Basketball.